Jen Lehman from Canada, she wants to... Is it Canada? Is she from Canada?
I think so.
All right. I can't remember where she's from. But anyway, Jen Lehman wants to know, who out of the cast did you become the closest to out of the 70 guys that you had and in the boot?
That's hard to say, because I try to maintain a certain separation so that none of them ever think they're the captain's favorite or anything like that. But that said, I think Damian Lewis and I really bonded, especially in the latter stages of the training after we went to airborne school. And I think between Damian and Ron Livingston, late in the training, we spent a lot of time together sort of by ourselves, where I could talk to them about being an officer, about what that means and what the relationship is with your men. And we would spend hours late in the training, after they'd learned everything basically that they needed to know, just talking sort of one-on-one. They were like two young officer candidates talking to the old man for insights and things. And during those times, I think I really got close to them. Certainly on my part, I certainly felt very, very close to them. And the reason for that was these two guys, Ron Livingston and Damian Lewis, really, really picked up the sort of officer culture. And in some ways, my style of leadership, because I'm what's called a Mustang officer. I came up through the ranks before I was commissioned. So I have a special feel for what it's like to be down there in the enlisted ranks and in the NCO ranks. And they were very interested in that, both Ron and Damian. And I think that the more I would tell them personal things, which I didn't necessarily share with all of the other guys, I think the more I told them personal things about combat, and about how it feels when you lose men, or when you have to give an order that results in the death of men. I think they really bonded with me at that time. So that's a long answer, Hoser, up in Canada. But
I just found out she's in Minnesota.
Oh, right.
All right. Well, it's the same thing.
Quite close enough.
Same thing.
But I think that's kind of if I had to single a couple of guys out, it'd be Damian and Ron Livingston, I think.
Now she also wants to know, Jenny Lehman from Minnesota, what is your favorite episode and or scene of the series?
Well, anything with Colonel Sink in it.
Well, obviously, yeah, because you got to look pretty.
I really enjoyed the scene with David Swimmer when I had to fire him as Lieutenant Sobel. I think there was a huge amount of leadership subtlety and a look inside how things were done in the World War II Army, especially in the 101st Airborne Division in that scene. I think David was a magic actor in that scene. I've acted with a lot of people, but David in that scene gave me everything I needed to pull it off, and hopefully I gave him what he needed. So that's one of my favorites. One of my other favorites, I guess, is the guys in the aircraft just before D-Day when they're getting ready to jump. I think just the camera panning over those faces and seeing them really, they were in the moment, if you will. It's an actor weenie word, but there you go. I think they were really in the moment there, and you could see it. It was extraordinary. I loved Bastogne with Doc. And all he did in that, what a magical turn he did as Doc Rowe, and I loved the great bayonet charge when they went across that land and trapped the Germans and caught them in the back. There's just it's very, very difficult, and I'm sorry that I can't grab one specific scene, but every time I think about the series, I can think of each episode and highlights jump out of that. It was just so well done and so finely performed by the youngsters that that practically anything they did brought a smile to my face.
I was interested in how, upon seeing like the behind the scenes, how authentic everything was, like from the uniform to the terminology to, I'm sure, the boot camp exercises were all of the period. So I wanted to know how much of that info was maybe fed to everyone, or how much did you do yourself?
Well, every evening in training, we have a thing called stand down. And of course, I had worked for months and months and months on researching that period stuff. And all my staff had worked researching it. We had talked to the surviving veterans. And so we had a feel, and we built this into our training schedule. Every evening, there would be this thing called stand down, and it would be after evening chow. And we would spend an hour, sometimes 2 hours, just talking about the period, about how things were in the world in those days, how people thought differently in those days, and those were psychological things that we were offering to the youngsters, so that they could sort of use them to shape their interpretation of a character. They got enormous amount if they were playing a surviving character. They got an extraordinary amount from them. But we tried to feed them this stuff. We spoon-fed them every evening, and it's at that point, at that stand-down, in which they can ask questions. Any question they want to ask, there are no rules, restrictions, or regulations during that period. And so I would really get some fascinating questions from the guys, and it was always about how the mentality of those days, of the 1940s, of the wartime 1940s, was different than what they had grown up with. And so I think that helped them in the interpretation of characters. And speaking of characters, there are two that I really kind of forgot to mention here. And one is Ross McCall, and the other is Donnie Wahlberg. And they played Lipton and our interpreter, Liebgott. Those guys also got very close to me. Wahlberg knew that I had been a senior NCO before I became an officer. And so Donnie would spend time talking to me about what it's like to be a senior NCO. And I think I really got a great deal of respect, and I felt a great deal of kinship with him. Ross, God bless him, I love that guy, reminded me of a guy that I had known on active duty in Beirut. I think he told you this story, as a matter of fact. And he reminded me so much of this young guy that was one of my sergeants in Beirut that we called the Bolt, because he was harder than a bolt. And so I began to call Ross the Bolt, and I still call him that to this day. So anyway, I wanted to include those guys.
Yeah.